Hey everybody, this is FrSkyStve. Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 3 of our Down and Dirty series where we go into setting up a model. It's just the basics. It's more meat, less potatoes when we're setting up this model. So without further ado, let's jump into this episode. We are going to be talking about flaps in this episode. This is probably the very first Ethos 1.6 flap video to be made. So let's see where we're at. We're going to hit model right here. Oop, I pressed it too long. We'll try it again. A short press this time. Go into mixes. You can see there's nothing set up for flaps. So we have our work cut out for us. I mentioned before in the last episode that because there's no source, there's no way to control the flaps and thus they won't work. So all we have to do is click on here twice and go into edit, or actually once and then go into edit. And we could simply, you select it. Let me go back and show you this again. Click on it once and all you have to do is flip a switch. And so I'm going to flip switch A and that populates. I hit return to get out of it. And now we have ourselves a functioning flap. If we go back into where we were before, you can see that the flaps are now set up. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Actually, no, there's a bit more to it. This is not quite good enough. So what I want to do is take you back into this once again by doing a long press this time. It gets me right back into edit. And there's a couple things wrong about this. I mean, realistically, we can get this to work by going down here and changing a couple things about it. But the way, instead of trying to modify this and make it work, I'm going to make it the way I want it to be. And the way to do this is to click inside of here. As you can see, it starts off at 1% at a time. Change that to 10%, and I can take this all the way up to 100%. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this side as well. So we're back to 100%. Okay, so we have two flaps now working at 100%. And I hit return to get out of here. The problem is that if we try to use this curve, now we really would do damage to the plane because it's going... In reality, what would happen is that the flaps would go all the way up, become spoilerons in one direction. The middle position would be flaps retracted, and then the down position would be going complete opposite direction to the extreme. We'd overdrive the servos and burn them out. So this, in and of itself, is not good. What we want to do is we want to limit this curve by changing the curve, and the way to do that is to click inside of here, and we're going to add a curve because the curve we want does not exist. So the first thing we want to do is give it a name. And I use really short and descriptive names so you know what we're working with. This is flaps. And as you can see, there are a few different types. We have expo, which we're not using for this particular example, function, and custom. We're going to set up a custom curve. And as soon as you set up a custom curve right away, it sets up a 5-point curve, when the reality is we want 3 points. We want to have flaps retracted, flaps 1, and flaps 2. So we go into here, change that to 3 points. And we come down here, and again, when you see this, you can change this to 1% at a time. I believe that, well, we can go back and take a look. I'm going to go look at the document that we set up originally. Let me put it back in here, and we can see that the flaps were set up to be somewhere around here, flaps at 15% and 70%. So do you see that right there, 15% and 70%? Anyways, right there, yeah, you can see them. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the Ethos simulator, and we know that flap position 1 is going to be 0 or unretracted. The next flap I'm going to set up is going to be 15%. And the reason why it's 15%, the reason why it's not linear, not like 35%, is because I want this to be a takeoff flap, and you don't really need a lot of flaps to take off. And some days you don't even need flaps at all. So what I do is I simply have this as a takeoff flap. Maybe you'll take off a couple times and say, well, the flaps were a little too steep for this plane. I would like to have less flaps, so maybe I want to change this value down to 12%, let's say, or maybe 10%. And that's, you can fine tune it as you fly. Now the next one I said 70%. And this one is, I'm going to change it to 10% so we can get right to 70. Alright, so this is what the curve looks like. We get out of it altogether, you can see that's a strange looking curve. So what we have on the left side here is, this is flaps retracted. This is flaps 1, which is 15% for a takeoff curve, and this is for a landing curve. As you can see, we're not using the entire 100% because we don't want to overdraw the servos. And the other reason why is that this plane does not have barn door flaps. You cannot get it to 100%. At a certain point, somewhere between 85 and 90%, the flaps will start straining. You'll hear that the servo's starting to bind up. Not really great for your plane, so I always try to limit them. And in another episode, we're going to talk about setting the endpoint, so we reduce the travel even more. So this is going to be 70% of what will eventually be. We go down here. And look on this list, you see that for flaps, we set them to 85% in either direction. So it's 75% of 85%. So it's going to be somewhere in the 60 percentile range, I would imagine. And that's pretty much what you want for flaps like this. And with that, we are done with this episode. Please stay tuned for the next episode. And I do thank you for watching.